Good evening. Welcome to the Azeroth Review. Not sure if this will be the last Azeroth Review of the year. I'll not be doing one next week, just to get that out at the start, because obviously it'll be Christmas Day. And yeah, after that it'll be January. So yeah, this is the last one of the year, really. So good evening to everyone. If you're new, say hi in the chat. And again, we just discuss whatever we fancy talking about, Warcraft related, preferably Warcraft related. We haven't done necessarily too well on that the last couple of weeks. I potentially have a preview to show you because I've done. Hi Fraser. I've done my Christmas special video. It was more ambitious. Well, I'm what do you call it now? I can't remember what you call it. When you make animations with WoW stuff. Machinima, that's it. I'm no good at that, so it's, but I might show it you anyway. But I'll be bringing it out, tomorrow anyway. So let's have a look. How have I been? I've been all right, actually. The only downside I've had to this ridiculously low-calorie diet I've got to have before the surgery is, because it's quite bizarre, you would think being on, only a few hundred calories a day, it would be a hell, but it's not been. But when I climb stairs, my leg muscles, they're a bit tired, but that's because I'm getting hardly any calories, so that's fairly obvious. You're pretty annoyed about the cost for an Azeroth 385 piece. Takes too long to get a random one, let alone a specific piece, on my thoughts. I'm not sure yet. I haven't really, because I haven't really fully thought about how long I think it should take. I mean, the fact that you can get it at all is okay. Actual numbers, I suppose, could be tweaked. If a lot of people felt it was either taking too long or too short a time, they can tweak it. What Blizzard said, there was a similar thing with Legion. I can't remember what it was about now. But I remember what they said in Legion, the developers, which I would agree with, is it's easier to tune something into the player's favour than it is away from it. So in a case like this, you could argue if they're not quite sure where they should set the bar for how much it should cost, it's better to set it too high, because then after a couple of weeks of thinking about it, you can always bring it down a bit. Whereas if you start off with it being too cheap and you go, oh my god, no, this is too cheap, and you raise the cost, you invite another wave of complaints then. So yeah, it may be one of those, it may be a bit too expensive. The way I'd look at it is, I'd want to say to myself, how long is it going to take compared to, say, a raider to get your 3 pieces like this, even if you're going for random ones? Is it roughly the same? And if it's roughly the same, then that's probably where it should be. Of course, it's a much more random process for a raider, you see. But anyway. You can get a random one in 2 weeks if you can do plus 10s. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're doing plus 10s, it's not going to... Mind you, well, it's different amounts for different values, isn't it? You can go... If you're not doing plus 10s, then quite frankly, you shouldn't be going through a 385 piece anyway. If you're going for... But I don't know, it's a tricky one. Because obviously, what a mythic... Someone getting it from Mythic Dungeons. I was going to say Mythic Rating then. Mythic Dungeons. Ideally, of course, you want to save up and get your targeted one, because there's so many different ones. I mean, if you're like me, I might be inclined to go for the random ones purely because I'm thinking to myself, well, although there are ones that I particularly like, because I'm not doing anything seriously, does it really matter what I could just do with these 385 pieces? That being said, there are some bad traits, because I have 370 Azeroth gear in my shoulders and chest, and there are some traits I could get on a 385 that would be worse than that, so I don't know. I'm still not decided what I would do on that. Putting on a curly wig and doing a lore impression for my Christmas vid. No, I'll leave that to Evertil and Taliesin. That's not my thing. No, it's just a variation. I'll show it in a bit. It's just a variation on the A Visit from St. Nicholas poem, where I've basically changed half the lines to be sort of Warcrafty themed. I did a little video to go with it, but I am not skilled at such matters. I will warn you now. Is it worth waiting at the start to get a single specific Azerite piece or 2 or 3 random ones? I would say if you can wait to get the specific one, wait to get the specific one. Because the loot table for Azerite pieces from Mythic Dungeons is so vast. I wouldn't fancy my chances of getting lucky. So I would always say the default setting is save up. And if you're saving up and you think to yourself, it gets to a certain point, you're thinking, do you know what? My gear's just too far behind. I need to get a piece, even if it's just, you know, not ideal stats or traits, I should say, then just get one. But I would always say, if you can stand to save up for it, save up for it. But of course, that takes longer, quite a bit longer. So there you go. Hi, Alessandra. Okay, so... But yeah, I mean, it's a step in the right direction at least. And as I say, if it's too cheap or something like that, they can always bring it down. Or, sorry, too expensive. It's only the specific one that might be. I mean, the comparison there with the raid is, with raids, although it's a much more random process, of course, you've got a much smaller loot table. So when you do get Azerite pieces, there's usually only 1 or 2 it can be for each slot, isn't there? So you're more likely to get your BIS ones from raid, assuming BIS ones are even in the raid, evening, Danny, than you are from Mythic Dungeon. So I don't know, but I'm inclined to just save up. I've got to be honest, I'm just likely to save up. And if I crack at some point and go, no, I just want to get a 385 piece, then I'll do that. But I just know that there's a chance if I get a random piece, there's a good chance I'll get one with poor traits. And there's only a very low chance of getting one with the traits I actually want. The Island Weekly. I haven't done islands at all now. I did it a little bit at the start in pugs. I now refuse to do anything in a pug. Point blank refuse. Like this week is another week when I've not been able to do Mythic Plus Dungeons because the people in the group we're nowhere to be seen this weekend, so it's another week where I'm not going to get to do one. So I'm not going to get any like thingy to turn in for my whatchamacallit anyway. But I'm refusing to even try and pug. Same with islands. So I would do islands with people I know. I'm not going to do them with randoms. When will they improve their class design? Well, they may be in the process. It says you don't even care about all the good content because classes are super boring to play. Well, I mean, I try not to use the words boring or exciting or anything like that because they're subjective. But there is something fundamentally flawed with the whole class design philosophy going to BFA. And it was discussed ad infinitum all the way through. What they've done is they've basically acknowledged this, not publicly, but they have done something about it. They have thrown Brian Helinka in charge. And, you know, he's given a fancier title for it. But ultimately, Brian Helinka is looking at that. Whether we would see significant movement on it this expansion, I don't know. It might be something being saved up for the next expansion. So I can't really say about that. But what I would say is that the philosophy that's led to the situation now is going to be shelved. So we should see... I'm not saying, oh, it'll all be fine in the next expansion, but we should at least see some movement. We should see in the right direction, I would say, at least. I'm super nervous about ever saying that anything is going to get better at this point. Nice thing about islands is you can complete them any way you want to. Yes, if you're with people you're communicating with, yes. I remember doing them, as I say, in testing. But when I did do it in a pub just at the start of the year, it was like, I mean, we did it, but it was just such a bad experience. When it comes to the Azerite vendor, you've decided to just wait until the new raid comes out to buy anything, as getting a random 415 should be worth it and hopefully won't cost too much. Yeah, I mean, if you can wait that long, then I guess so. Unless Blizzard do something dirty like reset your residuum. Do you think they'd do that for the next patch? Reset that currency? I don't think they would they? Wouldn't that be a dirty trick, though? But yeah, certainly if you're not in any desperate need for them at the moment, that's also not a bad idea. They're not capped, are they? I don't think that currency's capped. I'm not sure, though. Can't remember. How many war fronts had to be running concurrently in order for them to seem cool enough instead of just doing them for the 370? Well, if they need to be more interesting. You know, there are some hopes that they might get more interesting as the expansion goes on. Obviously, the very first one, the Hillsbrad one, was poor. The whole concept was poor when they, for me anyway, obviously this is opinion based now. I mean, I've said this before, but when they announced the concept of it, they said, oh, do you remember in Warcraft, you know, when you had, you were controlling all the little guys and they were going around doing all the stuff? Wouldn't it be cool if you could be one of those little guys? And I immediately said, no, that sounds like the most ridiculous thing ever. And that's what they did. So I'm not a fan of Warfronts either. And I imagine the vast majority, like you, will see them as a route to that 370. But at the moment, if you've been playing since the start, I can't imagine a 370 piece is all that tempting, if I'm going to be honest. I have a spider on my shoulder. I don't think I do. I've got a polar bear on my shoulder, potentially. You're a US player and you just did the 3 mythics required for the weekly cap. Very difficult and fun. A lot of different from the past 3 weeks of chain pull and AoE and down. Okay, so you think they've improved then. Will I ever return to high-end mythic raiding? You'd love to see another mythic kill Jaden moment. That was not only uncharacteristic, it was very early on in progress, and I never did it again. But I think it's unlikely, if truth be told. I had to stop because work just got incredibly busy, and I don't see that changing. And I've said before, even if it does, the thing is, I am coping with not doing mythic raiding a lot better than I expected to, which means that let's say I won the lottery. It's a big one tonight on the Euro Millions. Wow, I won that. Cha-ching. Could do whatever I like for life. But, you know, so let's say that happened. Would I return then to high-end mythic raiding? I don't know. I don't think I would this expansion. Maybe I'd just sit this expansion out and start up again the next expansion. I can't say. But I'm actually beginning to think maybe not. You're seeing movement on my shoulder. I don't. Oh, well, I've got a green screen. The lighting isn't perfect here. You may just be seeing, you know, the edge of my chair. Oh, no, I see what you see. You're probably seeing that. Hold on. Where's my Ashbringer? You're probably seeing that down there. It's just a fact of the lighting isn't perfect here. I've got lights sort of this way. They've got to hit the screen, but it's difficult for them to hit me and the screen. Ideally, what I'd need is lights in front of me, but I don't have anything suitable. I've got limited space in here. It's always very difficult to appreciate how much space there is when you're using a green screen. It's not that much space in here for effective lighting. So it's just, sorry, it's just the poor green screen. Or poor lighting, more specifically. The green screen is fine. But anyway, sorry, let's catch up. You think what they'll do this expansion is focus on improving the quality of Azerite traits since they'll essentially be tier armor sets in 8.2? Possibly. There's just so many, though. It's such a lot of work. Really is. Because they were told, you know, a long time before it launched. A lot of people... I mean, I know a lot of people were saying, oh, you know, there's so many boring Azerite traits. Now, I don't have an issue with that because some of them just need to do a thing. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that. But, you know, people were looking for certain classes, looking at theirs and going, I can't see anything that's really interesting. And that was an issue. And another issue is sometimes when they make something that is interesting, it looks interesting at first sight, and then you realise it's not really going to work very well. It's not going to be very good. There was one for Rets, which thankfully hasn't emerged yet. I don't know whether they're saving it up for later. I hope not. And what it did is when you use your major DPS cooldown and your Avenging Wings, you do a certain amount of damage in that. Then when your wings faded, you got another buff. It basically buffed, I can't remember, I think it buffed your strength. But it basically gave you another DPS buff after it. And the amount of that buff it gave you was related to how much damage you did during wings. So the more damage you did during wings, the bigger that buff would be. The problem with that is it means your DPS cooldown becomes quite a large window. Which sounds great. People go, oh, what you complain about? The problem is, like in a realistic situation, particularly a raid fight, What you want to do when your DPS cooldowns are going, you want to plant your feet and do maximum DPS. If you're having to move quite a lot for mechanics and things, and you can't plant your feet for like 40 seconds or whatever, then that means you're going to be losing out on the damage from it. The problem with that becomes twofold. One, obviously it's very disappointed you not being able to do as much damage as you should be able to do because you have to deal with these mechanics during cooldowns, which is hellish. Secondly, when you're trying to sim which trait's going to be best for you, that sim will assume you're going to make full use of that trait. But if you know you're not going to be able to, you've got to try and manually account for that and maybe think another trait might be better on this fight. So it makes the whole thing a lot more complex. And I'm all for, you know, complexity in a way, but not that sort, because that's just unpleasant. Classes just feel too cookie cutter in your opinion. Regardless of what you play, it's either a builder spender type, a tank, or some sort of healer. Well, build and spending is sort of, I mean, there's limited other things to do. I'm not saying there are no other, like in some games I might have seen the odd class that does something different, but very few, if I'm honest. I don't criticise them for that, if I'm going to be honest. That being said, I think there are some very unique styles that I have seen in other MMOs that they could bring into the game. But I don't criticise them for that aspect of it. I think the classes are different enough. My issue has always been, as I say, ever since they started doing this, that they're focusing too much on making specs unique. And they've said this again recently, haven't they, last week? And they shouldn't do. Don't make them unique. Don't need to be unique. Anyway, they'll make the 450 and stuff very expensive. I'm sure they will, but if you're saving up for it in the interim, unless of course there's a sense of inflation with it, such that you'll get far more residuum in the next patch, and therefore even if you saved it all up now, it would still be a relatively small amount. Possibly they could do that, but I don't know. Who knows? You're not sure, but you think that you heard it wasn't going to reset, but you'll check the patch. But before the... Hang on. What wasn't going to reset? Have I missed something? Right, anyway. Sorry, I'll get to this Caleb's question first. How do I feel about the limiting the number of abilities you can have in your bars so you make a choice? What, you mean like Elder Scrolls? I don't think it would be well received in World of Warcraft. It works in Elder Scrolls. I'm not saying it couldn't work in WoW, but I just think... When a game has been going for a certain amount of time, I think there are plenty of things you can change about that game. But I think there are some core things that you probably shouldn't. So if they brought out another World of Warcraft MMO, then they could absolutely go along those lines. Because it does work in Elder Scrolls to a point. But I don't think people would accept it in WoW. Whether it would work in terms of decent gameplay or not is irrelevant. People wouldn't accept it. What are my thoughts on the XP requirements being reduced? Is this change overdue or is it appropriately timed in my mind? My issue is not so much the amount of XP you need for a level. It's the amount of levels you need to get to level cap. Because my issue has always been, and it might just be me as a long-term role-playing gamer, rather than on a game myself. When you get a level... on a character in a role-playing game, God, voice is going. You should get something that you know. It's like, right, your character's now become more powerful. Here are some abilities that you have learned, and you don't get that. You do not get that in WoW. And I know obviously you can't get a new ability every level with the number of levels there are. Even if they halve the number of levels, you still couldn't get an ability every level. But you could get something every level that basically draws it. You need to feel better having a level. The problem now is, and this is particularly prevalent when you level up in the latest content, when you gain a level, you become weaker. Think what it was. The BFA leveling as well, from this point of view, only this point of view, was the worst expansion ever. I'm not saying leveling was, but from this point of view. Because if you think about it, those of us who played Legion, where did we start off? 110 in our finest Mythic Antorus gear, or whatever you did. 2 legendaries. 3, well, what else do we have? set bonuses, tier set bonuses, the last ones ever, potentially. You know, basically really good stuff. Massively good stuff. And as you leveled up, every time you got a level, because you weren't getting any gear from the quest guys, because your gear was way better, you got weaker. Because your crit went down, your haste went down. Everything relative to what you were coming up against went down. And then you got to a certain point and your legendaries didn't work anymore. So then you got a lot weaker. You know, and you keep going like that. And that's the problem. You know, you need something to make you pleased when you get a level. The only reason you're pleased when you get a level, when you were leveling in BFA, is it's another one chalked off until you get to level cap. It's like counting down the days till you can be released from prison. Hi, Will. Thank you very much. Let's have a look. But anyway, do I miss tier sets? Yes and no. I don't think... The reason I would say yes and no, I'm not opposed to them replacing the concept of tier sets with something else. I just don't feel that Azerite armor was the thing to replace it with, especially if Azerite armor ends up, just like artifact weapons in Legion, becoming a BFA only thing. If they were introducing Azerite armor for the long term, and it was also going to be here in the next expansion, I would maybe give Blizzard a little bit more leeway in terms of getting it right. Even though they wasted months and months when they could have been improving it already. But I would give them more leeway. The problem is, I don't think they've explicitly said it's BFA only, but given that artifact weapons were Legion only, and these are the things that have replaced them, I'm sort of suspecting it might be. And if it is, if they're going to tell us that they're not even going to get the system working properly until 8.2, well, you think about it, well, 8.2, that means there's only one more patch left in the bloody expansion. Absolute crap. But, you know. But it all depends on whether it's a long-term plan or not. If it's a long-term plan, I'd be less annoyed. Took them months to nerf the experience required, and leveling still sucks. The leveling sucks because the leveling sucks, though, ultimately. The leveling experience is poor, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I think it's worth saying again. What should have happened after from the first expansion onwards, but definitely from the second expansion, they should have had a team. It only needs to be a small team. A team whose job it is, their sole job it is, to look after the new player experience. They went for years, over a decade, never considering the new player experience until recently, until this year. And they have said that they are planning a massive revamp of it, but it's a long-term project. In other words, they don't quite know what to do yet, but they know they need to do something. Okay, the penny's finally bloody dropped after 10 years, and they're looking at it. But if they right from the start had said, right, you three guys, you're in charge of coming up with stuff to make sure the new player experience is always good, then we wouldn't be in this mess now. And I'm not saying it's not an easy mistake to make for an MMO designer, because you focus on the end game content, don't you? The new content, the new expansion stuff. That's what you focus on. And in World of Warcraft, because it's linear, you have to go through all the leveling stuff to get to it. So they don't really worry about the leveling stuff. It's just old stuff as far as they're concerned. Anyway, how do I feel about the class pruning that's been happening, such as removing seals, raid bus pledges? I'm not concerned about losing abilities in terms of quantity. You know, I think Blizzard had a point there. I do worry that we lost quality, though, in terms of iconic stuff like seals and auras for paladins, for example. So yeah, I different shouts for warriors. I'm not saying the shout system was good, but I don't think they should have got rid of it. I think they should have just changed it. But they didn't. Well, you've got battle shout now, but that's just a random buff. Well, not random. Hi, Flyfer. I'm sort of okay today. Bring back the old talent tree points. Yeah, well, they'll never do that. My suggestion for that one as a compromise was you have the new talent system as talents, and then you have skills instead, which looks like the old talent system, but instead of giving you new abilities, Well, no, it did give you nobles. What did I think? Yeah, that's it. So you could choose, you got all your abilities from that. So you could choose which abilities you wanted in which order. And also then you spent, so every level you'd get a talent, a skill point, let's say to call it. And, you know, you'd go down the tree and with some of them you could actually choose to get that ability. And then what you could do for the next few skill points, if you wanted, is you could improve that ability to make it, you know, do 10% more damage, 20% more damage and so on. So in other words, when you just pick the ability, you get a weakened version of it, but then you can spend skill points getting it up to when it needs to be. And that would give something for people to do every level. And all it would require is that we maybe get, say, 2 new abilities each expansion. Or 1 new ability if they only make us go up 5 levels in expansion again, like they used to. That's all right. That's not too much. 1 extra ability an expansion. So there are things they can definitely do. They're just choosing not to do them. Depends how they develop the necklace. With Azeroth armor changes, we might be looking at an Artifact 2.0 thing. Sorry, okay, I should be back on. I do not know what happened there. I had a dirty message saying that the stream had been terminated due to a thing. And I don't know what the thing was. I didn't read it before it stopped. So, right, okay. That's going to be complicated when I try and put this up live later. I'm going to have to edit it now. Bugger. Anyway, what was I? I've completely forgotten where I was. You wish they would have listened and done something sooner with the Azeroth system. Well, yeah, that's exactly the point I was trying to make. Because there was someone, when I was on that video, that was saying, well, you know, we should be pleased that they're actually making improvements now and it all sounds fine. There's no excuse for the fact that they sat on their hands for half a year on it. But, you know, so many comments. Let's try and get through them. Azeroth in 8.2 sounds like super generic tier sets. Maybe. Can't have the flagship gear system launch as poor as Azeroth did and hope to recover if you don't have it fixed within 3 months. Well, that was exactly the issue. The problem is, I can understand from Blizzard's point of view, I think they bit off more than they could chew with BFA. And I think ultimately this was a problem that goes back some years. And it's because they probably failed to account for the fact that they got far more resources for Legion than they will ever get for any expansion again. They didn't have the same time and resources to do BFA as they did Legion. Nowhere near. So, and they wasted their time on petty little things that weren't needed and no one asked for. Like, how much developer time was spent doing those GCD changes and you know, going back and forth to try and make people happy. You know, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So, you know, and there were other things as well they implemented that were not popular and were not needed, and they wasted a lot of development time on. So they were always, you know. Was I the one that used the ambulance comparison with this? Possibly. I use all sorts of analogies. I don't remember them all. I largely make them up as I go along. But yes. So, but yeah, going back to the neck. Sorry, the problem is that it's like they're making the neck less relevant. The emphasis was supposed to be on the neck, empowering this Azeroth armor. I just get the impression at the moment that the neck is all. I mean, obviously it's needed to get the levels on it, but it's almost like it's not a major concern for us. It doesn't really do anything that special. And the neck is supposed to be the thing. So, I don't know. I just think the whole concept is a bit disappointing. Both in terms of gameplay and in terms of, like, lore. They need to evolve World Quest, make the world a fun place to be, more immersive. Well, they do need to make it more fun, but they need a range of content to make you go out there, though. You know, they can't just do it with quests, even if they make them more dynamic or, like, spontaneous or something. I mean, like I say, Elder Scrolls Online does that pretty well, but that's not all it has. It has other things you'd be out in the world for. You just need to... Basically, everyone will have a reason to want to go out into the world. You need to fire as many of those reasons as possible, implement them into the game. So things that could help would be having dynamic events, you know, so you're wandering around and something happens, like a boss spawn. Maybe instead of having a world boss that just appears each week, you know, they just spawn randomly at certain times. And if you're out in the area, there'll be some big shout or something. I suppose a little bit like the Dragons of Nightmare in Vanilla. Only they're not going to hang about. They'll be there for a few hours. And then that'll be it. You know, maybe a few times a week at different times just to catch everyone. You know, just an idea. Then, you know, if they decided that gathering trades should just be secondary trades, so everyone could have mining, everyone could have herbing, everyone could have skinning. That might give more people a reason to go out into the world as well. You know, having more use for those materials. Like, for example, player housing. So you can go out and get your materials. That's looking funny again. Because when it's disabled my stream one time, I don't trust that it won't do it another time. But it hasn't done it yet. Anyway. You wonder what they'll do for human heritage armor? I don't know. I mean, it might just be based on, like, it wouldn't. No, you wouldn't base it on the PvP Stormwind armor, would you? And we've got the Stormwind Guard armor from WoD as well. So, which actually reminded me, I thought about that the weekend. I hadn't really considered that when, you know, Ian Hazakosa when we're talking about the fact, oh, you know, we're not going to let, like, plate wearers transmog into cloth because they need to be that silhouette and stuff like that. My rogue wears plate, now that I think about it, because I've got the Stormwind Guard transmog on my rogue. But anyway. Is it unreasonable to world quests in the old world and revisit zones each expansion? I think the problem is that it would be a lot of work, and I don't think that on its own would encourage people to go to those zones. And the whole point is not to get people so much to go to zones, it's to get a lot of people together in the same zone so it feels like a living world. That's the point of it. So you really need a lot of people in the same zone. And there's so many zones in WoW. I think it would be too much work to give enough reasons to go to each particular zone. It's the sort of thing that should have been built up as the game went on and wasn't. So I think it'd probably be better if they just did it with the zones that they're bringing out right now. But they're not even doing that. You know, just like, I mean, I'm not saying there's no one in the Legion zones. Maybe some people have got some achievements they want to do or something like that. But I'd say the Legion zones are probably pretty quiet at the moment. And the BFA zones will be pretty quiet when Revenge of the Potato People comes out. And world quests are too far spread out as it is, yes. Well, they'll seem less spread out once we get flying, won't they? WoW used to give you reasons to go into the world. Now you just sit by a repair guy in the Great Seal queuing for PvP. Yeah, I don't even do that. Defiance is still a pain, although instead of being an Azerite crazed, they're growing rabid potatoes all the time. Yeah, that works for me as an introduction to an expansion. What you think the game needs is more dynamic events, some kind of themes every month, say Azeroth-wide Naga invasions in January, Elementals in March. That could work, yes, something like that. Monthly themes. Again, might encourage people. And again, if there were cosmetic rewards tied to them, much stronger chance of encouraging people to subscribe. Because they only need people to subscribe each month, and you've got them subscribing every month, haven't you? And if it's new cosmetic... And I don't believe that it... Like, I was talking, like, you know, when they did the Dreadwake mount, which I never got in the end, because I decided I was opposed to it. But if you got a 6-month sub, you would get them out. Like, I mean, I said at the time, what they should have done, if they actually just wanted people to sub, what they should have done, 6 months is too much for someone who wasn't going to sub anyway. And for someone who was going to sub anyway, you're actually punishing them by not giving them them out. So what they should have done instead was, first of all, made it 3 months. Because for the cost of 3 months of sub, some people may pay that for a really cool mount. And I thought it was really cool. I know some people disagreed. I thought it was really nice. Even though it was discovered to be based on a previous mount. But it wasn't exactly a recolour, so I thought it was good. But the other thing they should have done, instead of just saying you have to buy a 3-month block for this, I'd have said you need to purchase, you need to be subscribed for the next 3 months. If you're subscribed for the next 3 months, at the point at which you pay for the final month, you get them out. So if you're paying monthly, when you pay for the 3rd month, you get them out. If you already pay 3 monthly, then the next time you pay for your 3 monthly subscription, you get them out. You know, that sort of thing. If you've already paid for the next 3 months, you get your mount. So that's what they should do. And I think, you know, that would only require them to have 4 unique mounts to be made every year. You're not telling me they can't come up with designs for cool looking mounts and build them 4 times a year. Of course they could. And then, yeah, if they did monthly dynamic events as well along certain themes, and there was a cosmetic reward for that, whether it be pet, mount, cosmetic gear, something like that. Again, you know, I don't think it would be costly to do that. And yet, the amount of money they could make from more subs, I just sometimes wonder if it's me being thick, because I wonder why they don't do these obvious things. Another thing they could do, as cosmetic weapons and armor, you need to go back to old zones and raids. Again, encouraging people to go back and do old zones and raids, because they have done that before. I don't think that solves the problem, because you don't meet other people there. I think the point of wanting people out of the cities is not because they want the cities empty, because they don't. It's because they want people who are in the world for whatever reason to feel that it's an MMO, and they're not doing that. If you encourage people to just do instance content, it's still not going to feel like that, is it? You actually enjoy level... Right. Sorry, it's done it again. And again, I forgot to read the message telling me what's up. Not that I would... Right. Do you know what? I don't know what I can do. I'm just going to try closing down everything. Well, obviously not this. You know, just in case it's having a beef with some other page that's open somewhere. I cannot think what its issue is. I do not know what the issue is. Right, anyway. Sorry, I've completely forgotten where I was now. Gnomes are responsible for breaking my stream. They might be. That's actually a good point. See, this is the thing. You know, it's... in many ways, it's better for me to stream on YouTube. I never had these issues on Twitch, I have to say. I need to sort it out. It's bound to happen again before the end. I mean, it's happened twice in 40 minutes now. It is going to happen again. I'll just have to keep starting it up. But next time, I'll have to try and remember to read the bloody message. It goes away. It disappears. That's the problem. Anyway, listen to me. Once you go back to Star Wars The Old Republic for the first time since Hot Cartel. Welcome Relief from Round. Well, I'll be playing a bit of that this Christmas. My intention with streaming is, you know, to stream some random games. It'll include some WoW as well, I suppose. But to stream, I want to do some, like when I'm off, do some more streaming. Again, it all depends when that's going to be. I can't say in advance because it all depends on how I'm feeling when I come back. I might be feeling absolutely fine and be able to do it quite quickly, like early next week. It may be that not, or it may be that, and again, I don't know how long I'd be comfortable streaming, but I am going to stream a few games. But they may, what I'm saying is they may not be planned well in advance. It may just be that you need notifications to know when I'm going to be doing it. Do I think they'll rework professions? I'm not sure I would agree that they're the same as they were in vanilla. I mean, in basic concept they are. If you're going to be talking about fundamentally changing them, no. I did think professions took a big step up in WoD when they made them more useful. So you can craft useful things. Albeit you're not going to consider them that useful if you're a hardcore raider or dungeoneer or something like that. But, you know, to just build something for your alts and stuff like that, or friends who are, you know, crap geared, I think it's quite useful. But in terms of fundamentally changing the way we craft things, I don't think so, no. And there's plenty of things that I would do differently with lots of aspects of the game. And I think with some aspects of the game, they could absolutely get away with it. And I think with some of them, it's just considered too much part of the fabric of WoW that they wouldn't. But anyway, you don't get why they keep everything so systematic. But not that we need more RNG. but let different people have different world quests available to them, different emissaries. The problem with that is, if there's a really nice reward for a particular world quest, and you get it and your mate doesn't, and they want that reward, they won't be happy. They will not be happy. I mean, it used to annoy people because, when relics were offered for world quests in Legion, and for a particular class, a particular relic was available, because it was class specific, not spec specific. And, there might be one, like a fire relic for a warlock, and a paladin might look at that and go, I want that relic, but it's not available to the paladin because that was for warlocks, and they got a different reward for that world quest. ESO does crafting really well. It does up to a point. The problem is, of course, when you get to the point where you can no longer craft gear for yourself, which arguably happens a bit too early now, because I've already exceeded that point. But yes, the actual crafting system in ESO I do like. I think that's good. What doesn't ideally go with it, though, I do not like the auction house system. I do not like the fact that, it's not as accessible for me to sell my wares as it would be in WoW. You feel like some of the items you could craft in Vanilla BC were more useful than any other expansion. I'm not sure. Well, obviously Burning Crusade, there was the weapons. I mean, I used the Lionheart Executioner weapon as a raider, as a high progress raider. But other than that, I wouldn't really say they were useful. Vanilla pre-raid stuff, yes, because you could get things like Hide of the Wild crafted, which was a really good healing cloak, which was pretty much not replaced until Naxxramas, really. There was a healing cloak in AQ40 that was probably about as good, maybe a bit better. And actually, Cloak of the Broodlord for a paladin was better. Morning from Sydney. Hiya, Sydney. But you're actually Daniel. Shouldn't that be Sydney with a capital S? But yes. We just had an Australian, actually. He was doing some supply work for us for a while. Students actually really liked him. They were sorry to see him go. But he was only just he's travelling with his wife. Just picked up a bit of work while he was here. Now he's off to Canada for Christmas, and then they're going back to Australia. You quite like the incursions, but you think they should award a bit more XP, say 50% of a level. Now, yeah, if they had incursions and we threw those into the old world so that lots of characters could and just level up more quickly, and, as you say, rewarded 50% of a level, yes, that would be better. Do you know what I remember? There was a period of time, and I can't remember which expansion it was in. I think it might have been Mists of Pandaria. Maybe it was the same in WoD as well. I can't remember. Where you had your call to arms weekends for certain battlegrounds, and when it was Alterac Valley's turn, you could get loads of experience there. I would actually spend my weekend in Alterac Valley leveling alts up, because as soon as they hit level 50, you could go in there. You could get a shitload of experience in there. And of course, what you do is you do the quests as well, not turn them in until you're a higher level, because then they'd be worth more XP. It was fantastic. So something like that, where, yeah, some event where if you participate in it, and it's maybe an event that just happens at a weekend, say, and you get crap loads of experience for it, that might, again, it wouldn't improve the leveling experience, but it might just be another way to help people out get that leveling pill swallowed more quickly. You always end up with 200 maces because you hate maces back before transmog. The only thing, well, I always liked maces and swords, which is quite handy as a human in the first few expansions, because you got a bonus for using swords and maces. So it was always axes I didn't like. So when I got, for example, I think this might have been a polearm, Severance from Naxxramas, of course I equipped it because it was the best weapon I had. But there was part of me thinking, no, it's not a sword or a mace. So it's quite good when they got rid of that bonus. Because there's quite a lot of bosses now, when I think about it, where I haven't had a sword or a mace. In the past. The best thing about Warfronts is the update zone by zone. Yeah, I mean, the extra story you sort of get now with it. I mean, Darkshore, of course, had a nice little story with it. And the physical upgrades as well. But again, is it development time well spent? That's what I query. I don't know. Just imagine having Naga invade Westfall's coast every few months or so. Would also make leveling up unique and different characters as with all the mixed events at different levels for you. That would be okay if everything's scaled properly and not just this scaling within brackets. If it's scaled properly, because then I don't know whether it would have a negative effect on the people who are actually leveling in that zone. You know, I think it wants to be inclusive. So I think if everything's scaled from like at least level 1 to 110, but preferably all the way. But the problem then is they won't do that because they can't then force you to do their story each expansion. And you know, there's nothing wrong as such with the way they tell stories in each expansion now, but it does limit them from doing things that would make the leveling experience better. Like what it does, the way they tell stories, is it separates the latest content from the old content, and that is a major barrier to improving the leveling experience, because you're making the leveling experience a different game to the end game. So the problem is, you might be a player who really will enjoy the end game, but you'll never get there because you won't enjoy the leveling experience because it's a totally different game. Or you might enjoy the leveling experience and not like the end game, in which case they may still lose that player. So I think leveling should still be playing the game as you would be playing it at end game. Scrap leveling with low attention span nowadays, where quests are not voice activated and no one reads them. It's 120 levels of killing boars. It is, yes, yes. The event boss is solo. You can still group for the incursions. Pretty sure. Oh, so I'm missing that now. Could toss in native rep for quests in a given zone. As long as it's not seen as a rep grind, which it probably would be. Because either the rep is meaningless, in which case it doesn't matter, or there's rewards, in which case it's a rep grind, isn't it? You want them to update the graphics for the old zones. At least get rid of all the cataclysm crap. I'd like them to get rid of the cataclysm crap, but at the same time, it's careful what you wish for. I don't really wish for them to change the 1 to 60 zones now. Not because I'd like them, I don't, but because they might make them even worse. And in quality terms, of course, they wouldn't make them worse, but in real terms, you know, I just think they would make them worse. It's a bit like the class mounts we got in Legion. So I got my Paladin mount. I don't use it because I don't like it as much as the Paladin mount I got in Vanilla. And it's not just because of attachment to it. It just doesn't look as good. If they'd have made, especially as it's a flying mount, if they'd have made what I've been asking for years, which is a Paladin style Pegasus mount, not like Tyrael's Charger, that's got those airy-fairy Diablo wings. Proper, like Pegasus mount with proper wings for a Paladin, then I would probably use that. That would be good, but they didn't. I'm just missing so many comments. And I keep thinking as well, I'm spending half my time wondering when this bloody stream's going to collapse again. You'll never understand why they tunnel a main story now. Wrath gave you options, you'd only end up doing like half the continent at best. It's because they want to tell this story, and the problem is, the more you insist that players go through a story, of course, has a sequence. And that just makes it more and more on rails. You know, the old theme park. It's always been a theme park MMO, but it's just so much on rails now. That, you know, it really is. And that's a massive downside to it. So Blizzard may feel from a storytelling point of view it makes for better stories and therefore it's justified. But from a gameplay point of view, I mean, we spend longer on the gameplay than we do on the story. I just don't think it's justified. I think the gameplay always has to come first. That's my view. The gameplay has to come first. And the way you get around, if you want to tell a story, is you have each zone has its own story. Self-contained story. Part of the bigger world, but a self-contained story. And each raid tier has its own story, but doesn't have to follow the zone stories. Just disconnect them. You can still have general themes for the expansion, but don't require you to go through these steps in this order, because it acts against trying to let people explore. Anyway. Ticky one for the Horde in Drustovo is the worst. Takes so long and you're invincible, it's so amazingly boring. You'd love to see Stranglethorn with modern fidelity. Yeah. Yeah, especially looking over Zuldgarup. When you go into that sort of big tree thing, it looks a bit dodgy. You love your prop pally mount. The colours look great, but it looks awful. It looks like it's made out of Lego. It's like the gear from the tier gear from Tomb of Sargeras. It's like Lightbringer, only they've made it look like it's made out of Lego. Halfway up to 207 Legion marks to get the thingy mount. Oh, so that's something maybe I should do over Christmas. Maybe I should actually do a load of world quests and get my... I've not even exalted with anyone. I haven't even done that. No, there's no real interest. Because that's what I was sort of thinking. I still haven't done that video and I need to do that bloody video. Maybe I have to do that tomorrow. I'm now running out of time to get the videos done that I need to do before I go into hospital, because priority tomorrow has got to be like getting ready. Drusvar is a great story. A lot of the individual zones have a good story. The problem is that they needed you to have done Nazmir for Uldir, and they shouldn't have done. You know, they should have told the story of Uldir through doing Uldir, and not requiring to have done a particular zone. If they didn't require you to do the story in a particular zone to do a particular piece of endgame content, you know, then they could just allow you to do, you know, at level 1, go wherever you like. If you can physically travel there, you can go and do the quest there, and not make it impossible to physically travel there. Obviously, there are some expansions, people already noted this, where that would be a problem. And the reason it'd be a problem is because Blizzard didn't think about it in advance. So obviously, Warlords of Draenor would be a problem because you've got to activate the portal. But it's not impossible to sort out. Not impossible. Priest got a holy chicken owl thing. What, you mean the mount? It was just the owl thing, wouldn't it? Looked like it'd flown into a window. Wouldn't be that much work to rip out all the Cataclysm references. Really mostly affects zones like Badlands. I don't know, there's a lot of it in a lot of places. There's a lot of it. There are some zones where it's more in your face than others, but there's a lot of it about. You've done everything new in 8.1 except the actual main stories on both Alliance and Horde. Oh, well, I did them on... I haven't actually done anything in 8.1. I've done it on the PTR, though, for Horde. The problem is you have to do everything in every zone. No choice, same problem our toons have. Well, you have to do every part of the main quest in each zone, should we say. You'd have to do everything. But, yeah. Taliesin said the store mount isn't cash only, as you can grind the Blizz cash for it with WoW Gold. The pins on it. I don't care whether a mount is cash only. I have no issue with them. I have said before, and I know some people don't like this, I have no issue with them expanding the WoW store with cosmetic gear, that includes mounts, to raise revenue. If it came at the if the consequence of that was that they gave us a more enjoyable experience in game, and stopped trying to get people to stay subscribed with schemes that don't even bloody well work. Just if you want to make more money by expanding the store with, stuff. Don't mind that. In fact, I think it's better that it should be unique to the store, because the problem is if you allowed people to buy things like, say, the Lucid Nightmare, then other people would say, hang on a minute, I works for that in-game, why should someone just be able to buy it? So it's actually better if it's separate stuff. And I know completionists wouldn't be happy, but, you know, you can't have everything. Druids are still waiting on their class mount. They are their own class mount. They turn into things. They don't need a special class mount. They have half a dozen of them. The war campaign didn't hold your interest like Suramar. I don't know that Suramar was that interesting. It wasn't bad. I mean, the best version they ever did was Isle of Thunder. And arguably that was like the second time they ever tried something like that. And it's a bit disappointing that that was the best version they ever did. So Isle of Thunder was actually really good. I wouldn't have said that Suramar was as good as that, because you didn't really see as much change. I think that was the thing. With Isle of Thunder, every time it sort of went to the next phase, you saw change. It was different. And the idea of a zone expanding over time is really good. You know, that was a good feature of MoP. MoP had a lot of very good features. There's no unique mounting game. There's 50 horses. There are unique mounts in game. But there's an awful lot of recolors sometimes. Well, but, you know, so most just have recolors. You haven't seen your class mount yet this expansion. I don't think you're going to either. I think they pretty much said they regretted doing class stuff after Legion, where they did too much of it. They should add something like Kel'Sara questline so we can get epic loot, not just random drop. Well, I've always thought, like, if instead of just randomly dropping gear, bosses dropped stuff that then, you know, and you turned it, you know, and you went on an epic quest line to gather various things and then turned it in and got your item then, you know, that could be more interesting. Again, I'm not sure that they can do that now. The problem is you know, a system like that would be much better if you didn't get gear as often, if each piece of epic gear was a special thing again. Now that they give them away like sweets, it wouldn't really work, you know. And I don't think they could just change it back either. Timeless Isle was fantastic. I mean, it depends on your point of view. I thought it was interesting. I would certainly not object to them doing something like that each expansion. And I don't really know why they haven't, because it is popular. And it gets people there. People will go there. And now that you've got the war mode system, because that was a problem I had with Timeless Isle, you go there and people ganking you when you just wanted to do, you know, crawl on ropes or something. Given that you'd be able to choose that, I suppose, yeah, a Timeless Isle type of thing would be actually quite nice. Class theme content is the best. Why would they regret that? Because, in their words, if they do separate class quests, they're designing 12 times as much content. Because each individual player, if you assume each individual player has one character, which a lot do, let's be honest, obviously, you know, the vast majority have one character, one class. They're just going to experience 1/12 of all that work. And that's what they're fixated on. That's why they introduce lots of different versions of raids, for example, and why they've done lots of different versions of dungeons, even though that has actually worked out better. It's because they don't like the idea of designing content and then only like 10% of people doing it. It seems a waste to them. What do I think about Paladin now in 8.1? Paladin in 8.0 was sort of okay. My main gripes were AoE not good enough. Well, that has been improved. Utility, well, that's still an issue. For raiding, particularly. So, and I suppose defensives. So they haven't really tackled that. They've massively improved the AoE. But they didn't put in There was supposed to be a change to Divine Judgment, which didn't go through, and I don't know why. Timeless Isle is too dated. No, the concept isn't. You could easily do a Timeless Isle type thing each expansion. And in fact, with this expansion, it'd be obvious to do another little island, but a special one. With gameplay changing each expansion, patch narrative is the only constant. I don't see that gameplay does fundamentally change each expansion. Like, I mean, as a raider who can go back since vanilla, the raiding hasn't really changed. You know, it really hasn't that much. The only change that really happened is when you went from 40 man to 25 man, that meant you could carry fewer plebs. When you went from 25 man to 20 man, then again, it meant you could carry fewer idiots. That's really the only change that happened. There was much more collective responsibility. But in terms of the way an individual player who played seriously like me approached it, much the same. There were mechanics to deal with. It's not even like you get new mechanics. Every now and then you do. The Illidan phase of Kil'jaeden was a genuinely new mechanic. Generally speaking, they're not even new mechanics. You've seen them before, and you deal with them in the same way. And guilds that will complete content more quickly. There's a range of things. It's not all about one thing, but one thing that will definitely work in their favour is if they recognise these similar mechanics and deal with them in the same time-tested ways. What do I think of the Nightborn? I've said before, they just look miserable. They look like someone in their near vicinity has released the vilest, foulest fart they've ever encountered in their lives. They just look very unpleasant. Your only issue is Ret, as you think too much is now tied into the HP system. That's their system now, though. I have no issue with the way paladins generate their resource or deal with damage from that point of view. I have issues with the fact that there's not enough decision making to be made to be had. There's a bit, but there's not much. And also the fact that any downtime is fatal to you in a way that it isn't for all of the classes. I'm not saying no others, there's some others that are the same. But it's so fatal to you. Like a class that has an energy-based system where you have to build it up, you can afford to empty your energy bar, go off, do a thing that requires movement, and come back without losing too much damage. You will lose some, everyone will lose some. Whereas Rets, as soon as you're out, every second you're out, you're losing massive amounts of damage. Massive. So that's why movement fights hurt us. That's why Uldir has hurt us. No one has ever explained to you why Blood Elves would fight Naga. Naga are the reason Blood Elves exist from the lore perspective. You don't mean to say they have to like them. You know. They're their enemies, ultimately. I mean, if the Naga came in peace, then maybe they wouldn't fight them. They're not necessarily reviled to them. It's just they didn't come in peace. They came to raid and slaughter. Plus, of course, they're led by Ashara, and I would imagine all non-Naga elves are not very happy with Ashara, no matter what sort of other elf you are. Naga are better allies than orcs, humans, or Forsaken. Are they? How so? You've been leveling a boosted mage. It's clear you have entirely the wrong mindset with playing a glass cannon. Yes. I mean, when you go from one type of class to a completely different type, there is a certain amount of adjustment. I remember in Vanilla, when I decided to make a Warlock out, this was after I already had done the Paladin, but before I did the Mage, and I just kept getting it killed at low levels. I just kept getting it killed all the time. Then I stopped it. I just gave up. And then about a year later came back, and I don't understand what caused me to ever die. It was so simple. And I think that came from the fact that in the intervening period, I had grouped with other warlocks and stuff like that and observed them and become a raid leader and all the rest of it and got to know classes and was much better prepared. The Nightmourne are making that face because they were on WoW coke for 10,000 years. Well, the Nightwell. I don't think that's... I don't know. I mean, the Blood Elves don't do that, and they were on the Sunwell for a while. Do I think they'll have legendaries this expansion? I do actually. Yeah, they sort of said no, and then they were sort of a bit coy about it. I think what they might do is they might introduce a Amanthal's Vision type legendary. In other words, a legendary that you can only get from the raid, normal and above, and is totally random, like Amanthal's Vision. Even though that's annoying to serious raiders, I can see them doing that again. I don't think that was considered a failure to them. So yes, I can see them doing a legendary, and I can see them doing it of that form. So it's a bit like going back to the old style of legendaries, only you can't assign them. But then you can't assign anything these days, can you? Bells used to be allies with Illidan's Naga instead of Ashara's. The thing is, though, it could be argued that although, okay, the Naga technically helped Kel'Thas, they were doing it for their own ulterior motives, with no regard for what was best for his people. Please God, not Amanthal's. Oh, I can see it happening. I can see it happening. The reason is, as I say, to begin with, they just said no legendaries in BFA. Then they seem to have been a bit more maybe. And you think about the ways you can implement a legendary. The Amanthal's way is probably the way that would fit in BFA. Catty, you thought had great legendary systems. Not really, because there's only a couple of classes that could benefit from them. Well, not a couple. You could have casters or rogues. But it excluded... and that was always the problem with the old style legendaries. It excluded most players. You know, it's like if you were a warrior or something like that, or a paladin, and you were doing what when was it? Because I wasn't playing properly at the time. But Firelands, you know, and your mage or one of your other casters gets this stick. So, oh, you've got a legendary stick. Well done. What do you want? A parade. Then you go to Stormwind and find out, yes, they're actually having a parade of blue dragons in the sky, rubbing your face into the fact that this person, who's probably the shittest person in your raid, that's hopefully not true, but it might be, has not only got a shiny stick that can turn them into a dragon, although at least it's not a cool looking dragon, but they're being, you know, lauded across the whole of Stormwind about it as well. Their name shouted from the sky. Ian strongly seemed to hint at Amanthal's. You think it depends how long the content drought ends up being. The longer the planned drought, the more likely another Amanthal's. I think there would be something like that regardless. I think they would actually plan it. Isn't the point of legendaries what, to make people jealous? I don't think it's so. I mean, the original concept for legendaries was, of course, that very few people on the server would ever get them. Sure. But that doesn't work in today's, not even to do with WoW, but just MMOs in general. Remember doing Molten Core and the legendary thing dropping for the rogue? Hang on a minute. What? Thunder Fury bit? The radio talks about everyone helping them and I thought get lost. All that effort for one person. Why was the bloody rogue... I know rogues could use it. It's a tanking weapon. It should have been given to a warrior. What was the Amanthal drop rate? I don't know. All I know is that I only ever saw it drop one time, and there was a sort of poetic justice in it because we were doing an outrun, and I was streaming it. So one of my viewers joined in, and everyone in my guild tried to trick them into installing this weak aura. It was a weak aura that was designed when you killed Argus. to flash up and make you think you'd got Amanthal's vision. So, which I thought was a bit mean, so I told him not to do it. And then he got Amanthal's vision, so it's a bit like a bit of karma for all the people that were trying to get him to erroneously feel that he had. Mind you, it would have been even funnier if he had have installed the weak aura, because then he'd have got the thing pop up, everyone would have had a good laugh thinking he thinks he's got it, but he actually had it. Joke would have been on them then. You can't live with the pushback on casting in Classic. Oh yeah, that was horrible. I experienced another load of that in the trial during BlizzCon. Yeah, that wasn't fun. Not fun at all. Welfare legendaries since MOP. The welfare legendaries were bad, but I couldn't think of a better system to introduce legendaries into the game, to be fair. I mean, if they do just do away with them. The thing is, it might be no bad thing just to not have them in BFA at all. And if people don't complain, and I'll be honest, I don't think people have really been complaining about it, then just leave it. Let them die. I think people were so sick. It's a bit like the story, isn't it? You always get these stories about, the kid who's found smoking a cigarette and their father makes them smoke a whole box of cigarettes and then they're so sick of them, they never want to do it again. Either that or become addicted for life. I don't know which. Maybe that was what Legion was for us. We've got so many legendaries, so sick of them that we never want to see another legendary again. I mean, I don't. RPGs need fun, overarching character goals. Yeah, it should be all about the character, developing the character. And I just don't think there's enough of it in WoW. And I'm not saying it's the only MMO to be guilty of this, but I just don't think there's enough of it. Why couldn't a legendary drop from a mythic end boss incentive to push higher content? It's the special snowflake thing, isn't it? The reason why these different difficulties came in the first place was you had a load of people saying, I pay my money, I should have access to the same content. And instead of Blizzard pointing out that they did have access to the same content, they just had to put the effort in. It's a game after all, therefore effort. They didn't. They said, all right, we'll give you LFR. Won't that be fun? Well, actually, before that, it was even worse. They gave them the 10 and 25 man, and then the easy and then the hard modes, I suppose. Lots of different variations. But it's that attitude. It's that attitude of... and it's the same thing with legendaries. If they can just about get away with unique titles and mounts for mythic content. They sort of get away with that. I'm not saying they wouldn't get away with it if a legendary was in the mythic raid only. And it might be an interesting experiment to try out. But it also might cause a bit of a backlash. Anyway. Chat is obviously too young to remember Ian Jury. Yes, they are. I mean, he's dead now, isn't he? He looked like he was nearly dead when he was in the charts. You hated the WoD legendary. Which was that? Oh, it was the ring, wasn't it? You felt like you couldn't switch mains because your DPS suffered. The main problem with that, yes, that was an issue on ours. But in particular, upgrading it at the end of the expansion by doing Hellfire Citadel. That was an issue. Because you couldn't get it in LFR, could you? You had to do it, could you? No, you couldn't. I think you can only get it in normal and above. The upgrade token, I think. Maybe a quest legendary by the end of the expansion, just a bit of flair would be okay. Do you know what I would do for the end of expansion? They did this in... Do you know what? MOP was such a good expansion. It did everything right. Well, almost everything right. What they should do at the end of the expansion is have the end boss drop things that are going to be useful for your leveling experience. Do you know how Garrosh dropped those heirloom weapons that you could use to level up into the next expansion? What has it turned out? That's a good system. Why don't they come up with something like that? It wouldn't have to be exactly the same system, but something that is something that has an end of expansion feel to it. I would just do that. Oh, mop classes, best classes. Well, class design in mop was also reasonable as well. I'm not going to say perfect, but it was reasonable. Special mythic drops were just something else for guilds to sell. You can't sell a random proc chance legendary. There's no selling that. What we're looking at. Problem with the WoD legendary is it didn't have a good story attached to it, like with Rathian. No, it didn't. No, you're right, it didn't. Incoherent like everything else in WoD, yeah. It didn't have a suitable... It was just, you know, we need to give you this powerful item. We're going to... And even the ability they gave it at the end in Hellfire Citadel, I thought was poor. Blimey, I don't want to jinx it. but it's been like over half an hour since the stream's crashed. This is looking all right. Mop classes... Oh, sorry, we've done that one. You tried to farm them and never saw one drop. What, the Amanthal's Vision? That's what you're talking about, you know. Like I say, I saw one drop. One. Didn't even go to anyone in our guild. Although better it went to someone who was brought in than a gnome. And it was such a good one for me as well. It was so good for Rets. So amazing. So disappointed. You miss your 4 bars full of abilities from Mop. Just make lots of macros. That's what I do. You can soon fill them back up. Just make macros. Don't forget to bind your selfie camera in there as well. You can bind your Hearthstone. Bind things in there. Loads of stuff to put in. The ring story was great. Just wasn't enough of it. I didn't feel it. And I especially didn't feel... I mean, imagine you could argue the same is true of Mop as well. I just didn't feel the wire ring. Mop had such huge sub-losses though. I don't know that it really did. You know, it declined. But let's have a look just how much it was. Because... let's have a look. Let's try and find it. Okay, so... Oh no, that's no good. Mop. It didn't... It only declined at the same rough rate as with Cataclysm. You know, I don't think it was that bad. Where did it go from? It started off at 10 million and went down to 7.5 million. Given that, you know, the game was aging, other games were coming out, it's going to be increasingly, you know, dated. I didn't think it did too badly. WoD was the real crash. But anyway, never mind. You were farming Argus every week. No, look, there were... Yeah, well, so was I. But no, I only saw... It's not even like I didn't get it. I only saw one drop. Because obviously I'm in a raid with a load of other people as well. The looms in Siege of Orgrimmar. Yeah, it was a really good system. That, I thought, was a real good motivator to keep doing a raid. I thought that was good. Especially for someone like me who had lots of alts. I thought that was excellent. I didn't actually get them all in the end either. The thing on flying is it would ruin a good RPG. Yeah, I thought, yeah, flying has been a mistake in an MMO. Except in maybe a very limited sense. I do think that WoW has suffered from having flying. But, and that's why, when they announced it was going, I mean, I said at the time, I actually agree with them. And I would like to get rid of it. But the genie's out of the bottle. You cannot get rid of it. And then, of course, a few days ago, they had to give in and go back on it. Does seem kind of pointless adding more heirlooms that are old slots. What's the point of more cloaks and trinkets? As if looms are OP as it is and stats being so meaningless at low levels. Yeah, but there's... Well, I didn't say it had to be heirlooms. You know, it can be something else. But adding in something that would be useful for leveling purposes. The Death Knight starting zone feels like a bad Metallica music video. I quite like the starting area for Death Knights. Shame all those mop looms look absolutely awful. Yeah, well, you can transmog them, so it's fine. You would not want flying in Star Wars The Old Republic, no. The zones are too limited anyway. It wouldn't work. But no, it's made WoW poorer. I mean, I think the game is better without it. The Flight Master's whistle works very well. Oh yeah, I like that. That's an excellent feature. You honestly think they should entirely remove heirlooms and replace it with a one button XP buff? Again, there the genie is out. Yes, the genie is out. Yeah. You think flying has saved some subs? It makes navigation so much faster. But if people, that's because they're used to it. If people never had it, you don't miss what you never had. So no, I think it'd be okay. Why do I think Blizzard wanted to retire artifacts so badly? I will never know, because it wasn't. They decided it was only ever going to be a one expansion thing, and I do not know why. I truly do not know why. You know, I mean, they could have wiped all the artifact abilities from Legion. I mean, imagine this. Let's say you had something similar to the Azerite system, but that replaced the artifact traits on the artifact, but we still had the artifact weapon. That, to me, would work better. Because then you'd still be able to have your tier gear, you know, which I think people do miss. I don't think people complain about it, because obviously they know it doesn't make sense to have that with Azerite gear. But I couldn't tell you what... I don't think they ever said what the reason was, and it's not like they ever intended artifact weapons to be more long-term. They intended it right from the start to be replaced. But that was another form of stupidity, in my view. They introduced something that they expected people to like. Good. And then they planned to take it off us. Who designs a game and puts a feature in the game that is designed to be very, very popular with the specific intention of depriving us of it a couple of years later? It's mad. They're detached from reality somehow. They're just utterly detached. I can't follow their logic these days. I mean, there's been times in the past where I could follow their logic and disagree with it, but I could follow their logic. And I'm not saying I can't do that at all these days. Sometimes I can. There's so many times when I just think, what? And I have to question, is it me being thick? Am I missing something? We use a combination of crafting and other things to make our own customised artefacts. Yes, I would like that as well. But I don't think with the current profession system that would be all that engaging. Maybe going off and doing like epic type quests to acquire those things might be better. Why they can't have flying specific zones from the start of the expansion. That way people can't complain non-stop, I want flying to skip the game. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I thought Blizzard's compromise was a reasonable one. You start off with no flying. The problem is when you are flying, there's probably not much of an onus on the artist to create lots of interesting little details, because when you're flying, you miss them all. So, you know, to make sure they can have a nice, interesting world and interesting terrain, then yeah, for half a year or whatever, just don't have flying, and then introduce it in, and that's okay. And then go to 2 new zones where there'll be no flying, because I'll bet there's no flying in the new zones that are coming in 8.2. You think the bottom line is Blizzard too intent on holding our hands up as we level and get up? They remove pretty much every choice. They have removed choice, and I think it's just that they don't understand the appeal of character customization. I think the developers, maybe coming from a background of serious raiding, are not themselves really into the role-playing side of it, and they don't understand that it's a draw. That's all I can conclude. The plan was for Azeroth to replace artifacts. Makes sense not to layer on layer for the sake of keeping the game not too complex. But they could have just got rid of all the artifact weapon traits as they were in terms of that constellation type thing, and had a ring of traits on that. And the traits are determined by the relics. You could still have relics in the game then. You could always retune the relics. Because I thought it was a bit crap having some relics that only needed by a few specs and some that were needed by basically everyone. Evening, Mona. Replace logic with corporate PR talk. Now. Yeah, but they don't even use corporate PR talk. I saw another example today. Corporate PR talk is this. A customer says something, maybe it's a complaint, and you ask, if it's not clear what their complaint is, you ask them to clarify. You make out that you're interested. Oh, how can we improve our service to you? Blah, 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 blah. Sometimes these complaints are moronic, and you still go through the same rigmarole. You know, you value in the customer. And sometimes it's not moronic, in which case maybe you can learn something to improve the service. Doesn't matter, you still go through the same steps. That's good PR. I saw today a post with someone, as is fairly common at the moment, I've done it myself, criticising the communication, right? Now, I'll grant you, the post was not terribly well made. But nonetheless, it was clearly a post complaining about communication, even though it wasn't clear what their specific issue was. And there was a blue response to it. Was the blue response, oh, I'm not quite sure I understand your specific criticism. What do you feel is not quite up to standard so I can pass your feedback on? No, they basically took the piss. They responded with a sarcastic comment. Now, community managers having a bit of a joke and sarky comments sometimes are good if the customer is sharing in that joke. If you I think community managers should use humour to share a joke with customers, to join in with customers. They shouldn't use jokes against customers. That's not good PR. And that's what they've got now. They don't have a good PR team. The PR team don't actually understand what their role is. And obviously, it's not their individual fault, because it's not. If it was like one community manager that was just behaving like this, you would say it's their fault. But it's all of them. That means their instructions, their guidelines are wrong. So someone above them, it's their fault, really. I don't blame the individual managers. You've seen Twitter bots do better PR than Blizzard. Well, yeah, and I think, it didn't used to be bad, but it just is so bad. Anyway. You're glad there's a new alchemist made trinket for the next season. The ones to start BFA were useless because by the time you could make them, they were too low level. Yeah, there's been a little bit of that, I think, with crafting in general in BFA. Unlike the last two expansions, it seemed useful at the start, as crafting often is. Less useful later, with the possible exception of the Dark Moon trinket, because that's still pretty good for some, pretty good for me. I'm still bloody well using it. Can't get rid of it. Can't get any decent trinkets. The incursions do try and shove in all the new allied races, a pretty feeble attempt to develop their place in the game. Oh, look, a Void Elf, now they're firmly in WoW lore. Well, we had them all pop in on the Siege of Lordaeron, didn't we? But you say that, though, William. The Void Elves definitely, I guarantee it, have definitely got a major storyline coming. 8.3. There's no reason for Void Elves other than something. And the something has to be coming. Has to be. It's got to be coming. And surely they wouldn't skip an expansion. It would have to be this expansion. Blizz PR should have... Oh, hold on. Should have bodily tackled that guy from the Diablo Immortal from going on stage at BlizzCon. Well, again, someone... they went on with a pitch. He didn't decide to do that himself. So, someone basically told him he had to do that. That's what they had to announce. And it might, for all I know, the PR team, when they heard about it, went, "Are you off your head? Are you mental? Do not say that. Cancel the presentation rather than say that." And maybe they were just ignored. It's just the fact that, because I'm not saying the Blizzard PR team is a shambles, although, you know, when you look at certain things, it's not great. But I can only speak specifically about World of Warcraft stuff. I occasionally see little announcement for other games, like, for example, the Heroes of the Storm announcement last week. Them saying that, oh yeah, by the way, we're not going to be supporting it with this, that, and the other anymore. You know, I mean, it started off badly, that post. It says, "Heroes of the Storm will always be our love letter to whatever, blah, 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 blah." And you knew there's a book coming, but we're not going to do any more on it. Well, that's not quite true, but, you know, they're certainly not going to do as much as they have been. I mean, for all I know, it just hasn't worked out. I don't know. Blizzard PR team has the optics of a sports referee. Don't blame referees. Referees are mostly correct. It's just that they should have more. The reason why we call them out is because they occasionally make mistakes that we can see clearly that they can't. You know, they need technology to help them better. Mustn't be mean to refs. Refs get too much stick, in my opinion. Especially football refs. When I say football refs, I mean proper football refs. Rugby refs, on the other hand, a different matter. Rugby umpires. They don't take any shit from players. Player acts up to them, they'll just kick them off. They'll smash them in the face as well, for good measure. It's quite funny, really, when you compare rugby with football. Because rugby players, big, burly fellows, broken noses, cauliflower ears, blood streaming from a gash on their head. You know, little referee tells them what to do. They bloody well do what they're told. Footballers, primped and preened, you know, don't want to head the ball because it might mess the hairstyle up. Surround the referee, arguing and pointing and gesticulating whenever he accuses them of tripping over a blade of grass. They need to sort it out. Anyway, never mind. Do I think the recent announcement of Blizzard pulling resources and devs from the HOTS team could be coming to assist with the Azeroth system in WoW? No, the opposite. They're taking devs away from WoW as well. You know where they're going. You know where all these developers are going. Don't you have phones? That's where they're going. They're going to the "Do you have phones" department. Hand egg referees. What the hell's hand egg? Is that like netball? American football fans all seem to believe their teams would never lose a game if not for the referees. Well, I don't know anything about that culture. I can't help that. Always some conspiracy of them in favour of the other side. Last we heard, it was all our best designers are going to mobile. Exactly. And really, could they just fling new devs at WoW and expect anything but more chaos? This is exactly the problem. The issue now is, I think that the coordination of, I think the Blizzard team, the World of Warcraft team has got larger over the last few years. Well, I know it has got larger over the last few years. And I think they haven't changed the way it's organised. So it's now too unwieldy for them to organise, and they don't know how to put that right. So I think that not only is the structure of the World of Warcraft team wrong, I think design philosophies have been fundamentally flawed. That doesn't help either. And then when you also combine the fact, and this is no disrespect to any developers working on WoW now, but if you're going to take your best developers and move them elsewhere, you are weakening that team. So not only in going into the future is the WoW development team weaker in terms of, you know, the sum of its parts. It has these duff design decisions that are not going through a robust enough discussion period before they ever make it out. And they're not coordinating between teams. They haven't got the leadership to be able to do that properly, the organisation. I just don't think we can expect improvements. If WoW at the moment is good enough to play, and I think it is, If it's good enough to play now, then okay, we're okay. But if people think that BFA has been a disaster, but it'll be better for the next expansion, good luck with that, because I don't believe that. I don't believe the signs are there to give us any hope of that. You know, I'm not saying that's because people will instant when I say things like this, well, why are you playing? Because I think it's good enough to play. But I don't think it's going to get better. Ever. Because it is declining. Even if it carries on for years more. They're not going to... It's not going to... Because of these problems, it's never going to see a big upturn in the number of players. And without a big upturn in the number of players and therefore revenue generated, they're never going to give their best developers to the project anymore. So the best developers are going to be constantly skimmed off and replaced with more inexperienced developers or just straight up not as good developers that they just don't want to fire. The team is going to get weaker and weaker. How on earth can the game get better from that? It's just going to be on a now a decline. You know, as long as it stays above the point at which it's worth playing, then I'm okay. It's just, it's disappointing, that's all. It's just disappointing. You still have fun playing WoW with the same people you play since the start, the ones that haven't moved on at least. Oh, well, that would be nice. I would like that. I mean, if there were more people doing more sort of content in the guild I'm in, then I would play more as well. Because I don't like... The solo stuff is not engaging for me. And I'm not pugging stuff. You know, so if I were in a more active, like originally, remember, I tried to join, let's to see if there's a casual guild, but that was more in tune with what I want to do. Casual, but with serious players, if you see what I mean. It's really weird. And, you know, I couldn't find one. If I could, then I'd be playing it more than I am now. But not enough to be able to do serious raiding. And when one plays EverQuest, one realises how much more World of Warcraft was and how much less it is today. Well, you can say that in a lot of MMOs, really. Because that's the thing. If you've only ever played World of Warcraft up to this point, you might not even really see what the fuss is about. You might just say, well, it's changing times. But when you play other games, like right now, then you start to say, actually, they managed to do this quite well. Because like when I first played World of Warcraft, I became convinced after a couple of years that people... Because I used to like playing player versus player in other games before WoW and hated it in WoW. And I just thought it must be a product of MMOs. PvP is just not very good in MMOs. And then I played Warhammer Online. And I thought, this is great. This is fantastic. I even joined a guild specifically to PvP with on a daily basis, or almost daily basis. That proved to me that you can have good PvP in an MMO. The story is horrific. The quality of the story is horrific. I don't think the story is horrific. I think the quality of the storytelling is, because it only needs to be a few points that just jar you and it stops it being enjoyable. But it's not a bad story as such. It just doesn't make sense in parts. The state of faction balance is worse. Well, yeah, I mean, that's buggered now. I mean, that's like the new player experience, isn't it? Faction balance. It's something... If you're going to have factions in an MMO, from day one, you have to have faction population management. You have to. You have to have someone whose job it is to deal with that. Now, in this particular case, I wouldn't say their sole job, but it should be right up on someone's job description. And it clearly hasn't been, because the problem then is once you do away with it, you know, you year after year after year, and it diverges and diverges and diverges. You can't then rescue it. I just don't think they can rescue it now. I'm not saying it's impossible to rescue. I just think it's... I can't see how they can. I have got no ideas. If everything else was scaled, better classes and other systems would go a long way. I think it would be much better. Not everyone agrees with that, though, I have to say. If you're truthful, you love the world. It's nostalgia mostly, but you just can't shake it. Yes, you see, for me, the nostalgia's absent because they destroyed my nostalgia because the 1 to 60 content isn't there anymore. That's what I shall enjoy about Classic. You're seeing a maintenance mode for WoW with WoW Classic, TBC Classic, Wrath Classic with cash shops. I don't know about the cash shops. The art style initially put you off WoW. Yeah, I don't like the art style, I have to say. I mean, I gather the reason they did it was to be exactly the same as Warcraft 3. Because they wanted, so obviously they wanted a steady stream of people to just pick up WoW from the start. I don't like it, I have to say. You get used to it after a while. It put me off as well. I like the Elder Scrolls Online style of art. That's my favourite art style. Why appeal to the casual player base then? It's the hardcore that keeps it going. I'm not sure about that. It'd be interesting to know where the balance of revenue came from. Because it's all right people saying, oh, the vast majority of players are casual, therefore they're contributing the most money. They may be, but you've got to remember more serious players contribute more than a monthly sub. Whereas ultra casual players, they buy the expansion and maybe they pay for about 3 months of subs a year. So in a 2-year cycle, let's say, so the expansion is, let's say, 40 quid. I don't know, I can't remember. About 40 quid, something like that. Is it? Well, it might even be 30. Can't remember, doesn't matter. Let's say 40. And then they pay for, in that cycle, 6 months worth of subs. So that's about 54. So that's about £100, right? You can turn that into dollars if you want. $120 or whatever, US dollars, I don't care. About £100. Whereas I'm paying like £27 a month for 3. Actually, no, at the moment I have actually let my North American one lapse because I've not been using it recently. I may get it back again in the new year. But generally speaking, I'm paying for 3 months at a time. Three months in 1 month because 3 accounts. So I pay the same amount of them that they do in 2 years in like 4 months. So, you know, and there's people that will buy things off on the store and other products as well, transfers, you know, all that sort of stuff. So it'd be interesting to know where the balance of revenue actually is, because I don't know, and Blizzard obviously wouldn't tell us. If they stop making expansions for a while, then they make content scale to max for a final best version of all. Yeah, but they need the money from it, because like I just said, there's a hell of a lot of casual players. They're spending as much on the expansion as they do on all the subs between expansions. Sometimes, you know, the expansion is worth more. And especially, like the last few expansions, there's been 10 million people buy it, roughly. That's a lot. To say it's a game that's only got a few million active subs at any one time. Might not even be that now. So the expansion brings in a lot of money. A lot of money. Don't kill the milking cow. They're going to keep up the way expansions are released and shrink development costs at the same time, transform WoW 1-by-1 game to pay-to-win game. I don't know. I don't know that they. I mean, they seem reluctant even to expand the online store for cosmetic gear. I really don't think they're going to put pay-to-win stuff on it. Remember when £100 was closer to $160? Yeah. In some ways, it doesn't do me that much harm, though, because you've got to remember, I get paid on YouTube in dollars. So, you know, this month, as December's tend to be, is actually a very bad month. But I'm going to get a little bit more because the pound is weaker against the dollar. I remember when £1 was worth $2, but that was a long time ago. When I was a teenager, we went to America. There was an exchange rate of £1 to $2 there. We were minted. We had loads of money. You played quite a bit of MMOs, and none of them catch the immersion with your character in the world like WoW does. Again, well, it's subjective, isn't it? See, for me, immersion is best in Elder Scrolls Online. Lord of the Rings Online is pretty good for it too, although it's very dated now. It was never brilliant, you know, in terms of a modern MMO at the time, but now it's very dated. But the immersion's pretty good, I would say. Black Desert Online is pretty good as well. It's just the forced PvP that stops me liking that. You wonder why they invalidated most of the world. Because, like I said earlier, they didn't have somewhat a team whose job it was to look after the new player experience. Because a big part of the new player experience would be leveling content. And that way, you know, that might have been avoided. Lotro makes new content, and that is a fraction of WoW's budget. Small teams in a way can be better. They do still make new content, yes, which shows you that an MMO doesn't actually have to make that much money. I mean, we know, for example, see, with Lotro, their design budget is probably a much greater proportion of their profits. However, WoW, I think it's something like, the last I heard, it's only like a few percent of the profit goes back into redevelopment. You know, I'm not saying it should all go back in, of course, but imagine if they even spent 10% of the profit on the development team. Imagine what they could do. But whatever, anyway, doesn't matter. They don't. BFA as a whole reeks of cut costs. I think that's going to be WoW now. I think we have to accept that WoW, although it's not close to the end, is definitely in its autumn years. I'm not going to say winter is coming yet, which I now know what that means now that I've watched Game of Thrones. But it is in its autumnal years, I think. What are we talking about other MMOs for? We're getting quite close. I may have to spend the last 5 minutes. I haven't shown that video yet. I have to show the last 5. We've actually been doing pretty well today. I've been able to ignore non-WoW based comments. Unfortunately, I've run out of WoW comments now. Make more. We're still comparing art styles, are we? Who's been pensioner? Who's a pensioner? I don't even know these games you're talking about. Star Citizen, never played it. But a lot of MMOs, as I say, manage to keep bringing out new expansions with hardly any play. They might have 100,000 players or 50,000 players. Winter will be when they make Murlocs playable. Yeah, Murlocs. I mean, I'd like the idea of a playable Murloc, but I also accept that it would be a very silly idea. It's almost as silly as making gnomes a playable race. Oh, wait. New devs might not be such a bad thing. More ideas and some excitement. Yeah, the problem is, though, right, you've got two types of dev that might suddenly join a team, that's not established. So one, they might be inexperienced. Yes, they might be destined to become a really great dev, but they're inexperienced. That means their great ideas go nowhere because they don't have the respect of the rest of the team. They don't know how to get those ideas forward. That's a problem. When you're more established in a workplace, you've got a much better chance of having your ideas listened to. And then the other thing is, so let's say they are experienced, but they've been brought in to replace someone really good. That means they're not really good. So that means they've had their time to prove themselves and didn't. So I don't see it as a positive thing at all. And if that young developer did turn out to be an absolute cracker, they could easily be moved onto the more lucrative projects themselves. So I see it 100% as a bad thing. I'm not saying, by the way, all the developers should be established, excellent developers. Of course, you've got to have some young ones in there. You have to have in anything because, they do bring ideas, and in a good team, those ideas will be listened to. But I don't think Blizzard, when we talk about the fact they don't listen to us, I don't think it's just us they're not listening to. I don't think they're listening to their own developers. I really don't. I can't imagine that the development team currently has a lot of morale amongst the developers. Because can you imagine it? Think about how dedicated to being a games developer you have to be to become a games developer at Blizzard. One of the most respected game studios out there. You think about all the people that would love to be games developers and never get there. So how much dedication and commitment does it require to actually be one of the ones that gets there? And you're working on a project with all your passion, and you've got constantly customers telling you it's a heap of shit. That must be really upsetting. And what would be even more upsetting, I think, is if you as a developer agree with the complaints and you see your own managers just defending themselves against it and shouting it down and ignoring that feedback. So you've got to work for what the customers are not going to appreciate. I think that would be very bad for morale. And I don't know, because obviously I don't have any inside knowledge there. I cannot believe that the developers, that the WoW development team is a very happy place to be working right now. I really don't believe they can. What baffles you is a lot of small changes they could make that players would love, adding various cosmetic rewards, adding back abilities for classes. Yeah, there's loads of stuff they could do really quickly and easily and cheaply, and they don't. It's because they don't value it. They don't understand. There's this fundamental disconnect. And I know it's an easy thing to say when there's something about a game you don't like. Oh, the developers don't listen to us. They're detached from reality. Because the people bring out these things all the time. But they are. Blizzard's all about China at this point, right? I don't know. They might well be. Don't Asians love furry characters? Yes, so I gather. You're not one of those people who rage on the forums. If I unsub, you won't be back. Well, most players won't. Most players don't unsub unless they intend to just unsub until the next bit of content comes out. That's a different thing. And that's the problem that Blizzard need to understand. It's better to retain players than it is to try and win them back. Because when you lose a tranche of players, like they are reputed to have done a couple of months ago, you will never get most of them back. You might get some of them back. You should not have lost them in the first place. You know. Why should come by the full name Activision Blizzard? No. Again, people drawing parallels there. They're just assuming because Blizzard used to be a really good company and now it's not, that it's outside influence that's done it. It may be. I can't say that it's definitely not. But at the same time, they can change. You've got to remember, the managers of Blizzard used to be games developers, but they're not anymore, and they haven't been for years. They are now corporate beasts. Obviously, Mike Morhaime being elbowed out is another indicator that they're becoming even more corporate and less about the fun of the games. That's pretty clear as well. But, you know, leading up to this has been leading up to, and I just think a company can just change. You know, its success can get it to focus much more on the profits and then forget what those profits are due to. Customers that want to buy their product. Do I think Blizzard underestimated the social experience and cohesion the server-based system provided as a reason for people to play? In terms of server cohesion, not necessarily, no, because I think things like that were ultimately had to go just with the modern systems, the way MMOs worked. I don't think they actively acted against server cohesion. They just had to put systems in that people wanted, like the ability. The first one was the ability to transfer server, which came at the end of vanilla. That was the first nail in that coffin. And then you had, you know, sharding started to come in. All of these things act against it, but there were very good reasons for bringing those things in. So I don't think so. However, I do think they underestimate the importance of community. They have for too long left community up into the hands of, well, the community, but they've absolved themselves of responsibility. Whereas they should have fostered a much closer community, say on the forums. And the new forums don't do that. The new forums just create an echo chamber for their own stuff. You resubbed for 1 month yesterday to level and art do patch stuff. Just haven't bothered with dungeons and dailies, as that's what was boring. It's okay, but nothing special. Yeah, that's the issue. You love the WoW universe. Yes, I've played it for such a long time that I absolutely love the WoW universe. The set bonus system from ESO is a better system. Yeah, that's a really good system. So those who don't know, in ESO, when you craft your gear, you can just craft gear and it's got like no stats on it. It's a load of shit. You don't do that. What you do is you go around in the world in different zones. There's crafting stations. And a particular crafting station, there's loads of them, has its own set bonuses attached to it. So if you craft any gear at that station, it will have that set bonus. And if you craft enough pieces from it, let's say you really want the 4 set bonus of this particular set, craft 4 pieces of gear and equip them and you'll have that set bonus. And the way you are able to access them is you research. So there's lots of different traits you could get on gear, but the way to learn them is you have to find a piece of gear with that trait and research it, which means destroying the piece of gear, but learning its trait. And the more traits you know on a particular item, the better these stations, because some of these stations have better set bonuses than others. And you access the better ones by doing that. So it's very involved. Crafting is very involved in ESO without being complex. You know, really good system. There are great numbers of videos out now with Blizz devs quoted as saying it is in fact Activision and they're being pushed to save money at all costs. Which article? You'll have to link it to me then. Oh, you can't link it here. You'll have to tell me where it is. Tell me what to search. Which article? Because I haven't though. I haven't seen an actual quote from a Blizzard developer saying Activision are pushing us about. I'd be very surprised to see one, but I haven't seen one, I have to say. Why is that Drew doing archaeology in bear form? It's just interested in it. It's on. It's one of those funny animal photo competitions from ages ago because I did just realise myself when I was looking through. The bottom line is I forgot to take a screenshot this week and I couldn't be asked to do it before the video, so I needed something quick and I thought, yeah, that looks suitably wowy. You think 8.1 improves the base expansion? Yes, it does. But the problem is, a lot of people won't forgive them for the fact that it should have been like this at the start. And in fact, even some things are still not ideal, but they are better. Blizzard's own intellectual property is worth so much money that Blizzard properties, that sort of large game company people rage over. Well, there is another thing, isn't there? Familiarity breeds contempt. You know, as you become... Because that's what happened, isn't it? Like, whenever I played a new MMO, do you know, or an alpha or beta of an MMO upcoming, do you know what you always get in the comments? You can't avoid it. You will always get comparisons with World of Warcraft. And as soon as someone does it, and you don't have to wait long for in the general chat, on a new MMO or in a beta, for someone to compare it to World of Warcraft, and you'll suddenly get a load of people going, oh, wow, shit, and this is going to be the WoW killer, this is going to be loads better. And you get it all the time. Because as soon as it became, it was great to begin with, and then as soon as it became the established MMO, all of a sudden it was bad. And you get people like that all the time. It's the same with music. As soon as a band becomes popular, they're no longer good, and you go off and find a different indie band. So, video. How is it a video? How can you have quotes in a video? Are you telling me they've actually interviewed... Is this a video just claiming that Blizzard devs have said this, or is it attributable? I worry when you say it's a video. But it's all right. But let me have a look anyway. It's titled. Oh crap! What have you done with it? I've got to try and look on here now. Blizzard devs worry about Activision influence. Right. Okay. I'll look that up. I shall have a little watch of that. Let's not do it just now, but I'm nearly at the end anyway. He shows the article. Is there not a link to the article? I'd rather just read the article. Anyway, people blame Activision, sure, Activision large, blah, blah, blah. Well, you argue that Blizzard would be the same thing without them. They may, well, that's my argument. I don't know that they would be, but they may be. We can't say that they wouldn't be. If it gives a link, I'd rather just click on the link. I'll go and find it then and click on the link. And I'll watch that then. But yeah, so I will almost call it there. I did actually promise to show the Christmas thing. But I think what I might as well just do is just activate it now because we'll come to the end. So I'll activate the Christmas special in about 5 minutes. I was going to do it tomorrow, but I'll do it now. But we'll just count last few comments anyway. That's why you say it's not so much the game, it's just that we're spoiled babies. Hang on, have I missed something? What was the first part of that? Who are you calling a spoiled baby? It's a Kotaku post. Oh, okay, okay. People need to stop assuming Blizzard are somehow the innocent party who would have been corrupted. See, there's a lot of things, right? Because there's a lot of things that could be done differently in the game. That it's not like we're asking them to do something that would reduce its profitability. You know, there's an awful lot there. Thank you very much, Will. Yes, hopefully the surgery will all be fine. It should be on this bloody diet. I mean, bottom line is they need to shrink my liver. By the way, if anyone is interested in following it, obviously, I don't want to keep talking about it on this channel. I have created a channel just specifically to chronicle my weight loss surgery and aftermath and stuff like that. It's on a channel called Dietetic Diaries. So at the moment, it just has one video on. I shall put a few more on. But yes, you could follow me on there if you want. I'm actually going to do a video before I leave for hospital where I just explain a few things and what's going to happen over Christmas as far as I can predict it as well. So a bit of a, or not quite a subscriber report, but something very similar. So I'll put that one out. Thank you very much, Will. I'm not actually better than Preach, though, because he's got way more followers than I do. That's ultimately the test. It's a bit like music. I always say Beatles are a better band than, say, I don't know, Queen. Unfortunately, as much as I'd hate to say it, because although I think Queen are the best band ever and I do not like the Beatles had way more followers. That makes them better. Am I big enough for bariatric? Oh, I am, yeah. I am. Don't you worry about that. But anyway, yes, thank you very much for coming on. And yeah, I shall, if you hang around for a few minutes on the channel, I will upload, or it's already uploaded, I will activate that video. And yes, if I don't see you before Christmas, then Merry Christmas, but I may see some of you just before then. And until next time, I'll see you later.